I think we're going to get sued by the Jim Henson Company for that, but hi!
I don't know who they are. You can't sue me if I don't know you.
The Muppets. Waiting for Mike and Yann. Oh, there we go.
Yay! I am just going to announce in other places that we are live.
Ah, good. I'm glad you did that before we did anything. Hi, everybody. I am cooking, so I don't know why I'm wearing a hat.
We also apologise for the slight sound issues. If you can hear fans in the background, that's because we're hot. It's very humid, very muggy.
Yay. I am pretty hot.
So let me...
Yeah, it's... So, and we've covered this before, it might not sound like that hot to other people if you're in a country with a different climate, but if it's 32 centigrade outside, and our houses, I mean, my house has walls that are thick, a foot thick and made of brick, and small windows, and it's basically an oven, and there's no air conditioning, it's very hot.
Yes, and it's humid in the UK. That's the other thing that gets us a lot of the time.
It's true. It is a nice hat. Thank you, Becky. People have been asking, Mikey was asking, is Becky bug? It's like, no, Becky's a spare bug. Have you finished doing things? Can we start now?
Yeah, oh yeah. I'll just
You did your dramatic start, and now I'm going to go type, please.
Yeah. I'll pass you over to Yann.
Yeah, we have not rehearsed any of this, so that's good.
We never do. It's taken all day
Mikey,
planning.
how have you been?
I've been very good. I've been cracking away at the ARDA course at the moment. The third section is going live as we speak, almost wrapped that up, and then we're moving on to the bass. And it's all about that bass.
The mic, the rock, the treble.
Yes.
Like my coffee black, just like my metal.
Anyway, so yes, I'm good. I've been beavering away at that. I've got a couple of exciting things that I really want to talk about, but I want them to be more concrete at the moment rather than...
Yeah, because there's that exciting thing you're doing with someone else.
Yes, and then there's the exciting thing that I'm doing as well, and I
I think we can talk about that in vague terms.
Yes.
Because it's quite an exciting thing. So we can talk about your exciting thing.
Okay. It's Blender based.
Oh yeah, if you tell us this is too technical for everybody. Don't let you can.
Oh, I love your toucan. It's awesome. So yeah, I've been asked repeatedly to do some more beginner stuff with Blender. I've been doing a lot of more advanced stuff recently, which is great. I really love doing the advanced stuff, but there's still a pull for a lot of more basic stuff as well. And perhaps going into some of the other areas of Blender or doing something different with Blender other than your standard stuff. So everybody's, they're modeling, they're sculpting, they're doing some texturing, but Blender's capable of actually quite a bit more, from being a video editor to a physics simulation to and rigging and animating are often shied away from because they are quite complex. I've seen plenty of people who go for the Rigify add-on, which is a great add-on, by the way. Don't go ahead and waste your time. Yeah, if you just need to rig a simple animation, go ahead, slap that on. But it's like everything. If the tools are handed to you and you click one button and all of a sudden you've got something working, but you don't understand how it works. So if you wanted to not rig a humanoid, but a tripod or a quadruped, it starts to get a lot more difficult than it would be if you didn't have those background skills. And also, a lot of professional rigs, if you've ever had a look at them, have a set of control bones. So you don't actually animate the underlying rig. You use those the control bones to do it. So you might even have sliders. And the other thing on top of that is not just character rigging or animal rigging, is also mechanical rigging, being able to make like a mechanism actually work all together, which is something that I find really exciting to be able to
that's
do.
What we were talking about when we were looking at the prototype for Mag Racer. We have these fun little hover cars that I threw together.
Yeah.
And the question was, well, can we make the wings actually work? When you hit the brakes, can we see some air brakes coming up? And it's really just a simple control bone and maybe a slider.
Yes. Very much so. And those are the sort of things where it doesn't have to be a complex rig. So, like Yann was saying there, with something like, I can't remember, let's take a rudder of a boat. That's a nice, simple, you model a boat and you've got a rudder on the... Yeah, for anybody who's not seen it. So, if you imagine a rudder on a boat, that's a simple bone that just goes backwards and forwards. And obviously, in game, you would code the bone to go from one state to another and then back again, depending on the control input that you were giving it. And you could do a similar thing in Blender as well if you really wanted to, which is super awesome. Ah, excellent. I'm going to make you full screen.
Ooh, I want to share my screen. Except, no, I've done this before. They changed it. You have to press play and then share your screen.
Yes. Because otherwise we just see your face. She. See your face. There we go. Let me switch over to the camera. So this is our Mag Racer prototype. Oh, we've got the AI in it crashing.
Well, kind of, yeah. And it looks like my frame rate is very jerky, but at least from what I can see on Discord. Here I'm doing 60 frames a second. So you've got this nice little thing, and it'd be nice when we're hitting the brakes. I'm going to use the word nice a lot. Or we're turning by frame rate. If we could get little bits of detailing on the car model. I mean, well, I said the car model. This is just a wedge I made.
So a pretty cool wedge.
It's a pretty cool wedge. But again, you're talking about like these little tools would be handed to you, right? I was just playing with hard ops. There's nothing in hard ops that and box cutter that you can't just do. I mean, it's just extrude and bevel and Boolean operations and mirrors.
Yeah.
But it's just easy to have it all in one place. The problem is if you don't know that those are there anyway, it's very hard to fix any mistakes or to avoid mistakes or know when you should be using that tool and when you shouldn't.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, full screen me. Full screen Yann.
Aha.
All of us. Close stream. 2 of us. Nice. No.
So, I mean, we haven't discussed this, but it's something I'd like to bring up. Are we going to go on with merging Godot and Blender courses? Are we going to separate?
Yeah, so anybody who's watched at the moment...
asking you live, what do you think?
Yeah. So anybody who's watching who's actually taken the Godot Getaway suite of courses, it'd be really great to hear your feedback on if you've enjoyed having both the Blender and the Godot side by side, that learning journey side by side. We did think in the very original, when we first started putting the courses together, of having one course where both things are taught, and we thought that might be a bit hard to follow along. You should jump in between one program and another, and also it makes it a bit difficult for people to follow along who are not interested in one or the other as well. We didn't want to exclude anybody, and we thought that putting the two side by side would be best. But I certainly enjoyed that.
I'll circle back to that idea in a minute, because we did want to talk about our main topic today.
Yes.
Touches on that, right?
Yeah.
Because we've got a course where it's a course on Blender and Godot, and we're making a game and all the assets. Realistically, one person doesn't need to be taking the entire course.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, and again, much like when Godot 4 comes out, I'll be making another, I'm going to use the word complete, it's a very difficult word to use in a program that big, Godot course for Godot 4, but I'm going to make this one modular. So you don't have to take the entire thing. If you're not interested in 3D, if you already know the interface, if you don't need an introduction to variables and constants and functions, don't take that module, or you can take the whole thing. And I think we're thinking the same thing with your Blender course.
Yes, very much modular. I want to be able to give people a reason for taking it, even if they've done some beginner stuff already. It'd be silly to sit through the first 5 hours in case you miss something. I'd always like to encourage someone to watch every video and not skip something, because I know when you skip something, you're going to miss something.
Well, especially something like Blender, which is so big.
Yeah.
So powerful, and the interface is so odd when you first get into it. It's really hard not to make a beginner course where the first 3 hours is, and here's where all the buttons are.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried various ways of teaching it where you just learn that as you go along. But if you're anything like me when I'm learning, you learn a little bit and then you want to experiment. I don't like to encourage students to just watch and blindly follow along. I'm always encouraging people to take what you just learned and apply it on something else. And the moment you start doing that, you're like, oh, but I want to do this extra bit. And then you get your learning gets too diffuse.
Learning through play, really.
Yeah,
right? Or
definitely.
Through play. Like, okay, I've got the basic theories, how can I apply this? In education theory, we call this metacognition, thinking about your thinking. How does this apply to my other things? What else can I use this with? So, just leave it in the back burner.
And you're gonna keep hold of that knowledge for a long, long time if you've used it in multiple places. If you touch on it once, I mean, we've all done this, whether it's your PIN number for the card that you got through the post 5 years ago but never used that card. That's something that I've done. I can't tell you the pin numbers on those. But the same is true with learning. If you don't use the knowledge straight away and continue to use it, it will just fade.
And Hanzo Baraka says, it'd be great if this channel teaches Blender and Godot. I mean, we kind of do, although most of our teaching is on our site. We put out some free stuff on the YouTube channel if it's like a short little tip or a video. But anything long and complicated, we like to make a big course of it. I'd love to make everything available for free. That's something I want to talk about, because that came up last week. Should education be free?
Yes.
I'm going to lay my cards on the table. I'm somebody who leans very left of centre politically. I don't care if you don't, I just happen to. And I have a master's in education, and I've made my living in teaching since 2013. One form or another, like everything from after school theatre activities through to undergraduates. I think education should be free, but I live in a world where I have to pay rent. So if I want to be doing this to a level that I could say this is actually adding value to people, I need to be charging money. It's that simple. If you guys want to abolish money, fine. I'll do it.
We had this with one of our friends over on Twitter the other day. He was reaching out, and he was saying that he was getting
Nate
some
at GD Quest.
Yeah, Nate at GD Quest. He got this message saying that someone was complaining that he's got a paid course where he still has a load of free content as well, and it's quite difficult because the program is free, just like Blender is, and so there's this kind of aura around it. And what I said at the time was that there's a place for free stuff. I mean, there's plenty of free content out there, whether it's YouTube, there are some PDFs, books,
Your library, if you're old school.
the manual. You know, there's all of the information for using it is out there, and it's free. But when you're asking for someone to spend their time curating a journey, and they're putting it in a logical way, which helps you, the student, understand what you would use these things for, why you would use them, and eventually, of course, that helps build up an entire course. And I think that's what you're really asking for the money for, is, hang on a minute, we've taken all the free information and we've put it into a usable box, something that you can then take and then actually learn from.
Yeah, it's a curated journey.
Yeah.
You're paying for the guide, not the scenery.
That's a good way of putting it. And far more succinct, but the stream wouldn't be as long if it wasn't for...
Oh, you have a full supervillain laugh there. Yeah, it was an interesting debate, because some people really laid into Nate for... And people have done this with me as well, for charging, especially when you're dealing with things like Blender and Godot, which are free and open source software. And people want everything to be free. And as Nate pointed out, the free and open source software is free to... you can do what you want with it. You're free to make a thing, not free beer. Right? I mean, the word free means several things in English. It's libre, not gratuit. I don't know why I went from Latin to a little bit of French. Libre to gratuit. Like gratuity. It's free money as opposed to freedom.
Yeah.
And you do feel bad sometimes when you're teaching open source software and you're charging money, although I think we charge reasonably fairly. I think we charge too fairly. Let's raise our prices. No, let's not do that. But yeah. But we wanted to talk about a thing this week. Do you like my segue?
Yeah. A thing. Fill in the people, Yann. Fill in the people.
Fill in the people. Okay, so a conversation came up with Mikey and somebody he is working with who was commenting on how much they enjoy working with someone with a different skill set. And
Yes.
I'm being deliberately cagey because the thing that Mikey is working on is quite a big project and it's not ready to be announced.
But soon.
And it's not a specific Canopy Games project. It's a project he's doing in collaboration with somebody. And until it's ready to be released, I shouldn't really be going into details. But the idea that working with people with different skill sets is actually how Mikey and I started working together. Well, no, we started working together over at another company. But our project together was, I made this little driving game. Mikey can make assets. Mikey, can you make me a car in a city? And then Mikey starts escalating, and I start escalating, and we're sort of bouncing ideas off each other.
And that was a lot of fun, and that really drives things forward. It's hopefully one of those situations where a lot of the time 1 + 1 equals far more than 1. Although saying that, so
Sounds like my maths normally.
True. I was agreeing with your insult. Yeah. Anyway, so a great example would be an artist and a programmer teaming up. The great thing there is you've got two people that would often, possibly find it difficult to communicate with each other. And in fact, in larger companies, there are people who would sit in between the two. Like you'd have a programmer who would do all the coding, the artist who would do all the artwork, but then you'd end up with a technical artist that would sit in between the two so they can communicate to one another. And it's fair to say that one camp doesn't necessarily have to be exclusive from the other. And being able to work with someone, so if you meet a coder that you get on well with, work with them. And vice versa, if you meet an artist that can make some assets for your game, that's even better.
It reminded me of, or it reminds me of, when I first started playing computer games regularly, back in 1982. We first got our first programmer there, home computer, the ZX Spectrum 16K. I remember it perfectly. And in those days, every game you bought was on an audio tape. Loaded up to 15 minutes and listened to the carrier signal, all the rest of it. But the point is, these projects were made by one or two, almost always young men in their bedroom.
Yeah.
Because they were very small, 16 to 48K of memory, once we bought the expansion. That's all you had. So it wasn't impossible, you didn't have enough leeway with things like graphics and sound anyway.
No.
It wasn't impossible to have one person making the whole thing. In this day and age, it really depends on the kind of game you want to make. You can be a one-person team making a really successful game. Stardew Valley and RimWorld are great examples of this. Except RimWorld isn't a one-person thing anymore. It was for the first few months and we hired a few people.
Yeah.
So that's a terrible example. But Stardew Valley, right? It's just one developer. However, it's an insane amount of work. And if you want to get good at all these skills, and we've been seeing people talking about this on our Discord recently. I want to learn rigging, I want to learn Blender, I want to learn coding, all the rest of it. It's like you can, but there's a balance here. There's this idea of the jack of all trades is the master of none. You simply don't have the time to become very, very proficient in all of these things and release a game. And then there's the idea, I'm going to steal this from Ghost in the Shell, over-specializing you breed in weakness. If you can only just do one thing, like all I do is player inputs in Godot, that's all I do. That's effectively useless, right? So it's finding that balance. And one really great way of doing this is finding people that you enjoy working with, even if you're both coders, but you have different ways of working and seeing the world, and you can communicate and bounce ideas off. This, by the way, was my major argument for why we teach theatre in schools. Was theatre teaches interpersonal communication in a way that almost no other discipline does.
Makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, sports come close, although sports is usually more about striving and overcoming and competing, whereas theatre is a lot more about we have to find a way of compromising because we're out of time and we're out of money. And you're always out of time and money in theatre.
And the same's true with game development. You always got another feature that you might want to add in. There's always another asset that you want to create, or just improve the look of.
I don't care if you're two people or you're Electronic Arts. You don't have the time and you don't have the money.
So
and
true.
If you do have the time and the money, you end up with something like Star Citizen, which is, I don't know how many years late, and we have no idea when it's coming out. It looks amazing, but nobody knows what's happening.
Which is a real shame, because it
looks stunning.
It does. I like my space.
I'm not paying for it till it comes out.
Yeah. Whilst all that's going on, I mean, I don't suppose Elite Dangerous is a parallel to it. They've released a game.
They were both announced at the same time.
Yeah. They've released a game, and they've provided all of these updates as well to go along with it.
But they released a game, and they said, look, when the game comes out, we'll give you this. You'll have no planetary landings. You'll have no walking around your ship.
Yeah.
We're going to try and add those in at some later date.
Yeah.
Whereas Star Citizen promised to have this, and this, and we'll have more stuff. And, I mean, it's a contentious game. I have my own thoughts about their pricing model, but the feature creep is real in that game.
Oh, and feature creep is something that happens all the time. Whether, I mean, from us putting courses together...
You know the moment I'm thinking about, don't you?
What, when Godot Getaway was a simple kart racing game?
Yeah. When Mikey came round to my place when I was still living in Orford, and he came to my cottage. I showed him this little demo, and I made it like this little split-screen kart racing game. And I said, whatever we do, we can't make this online multiplayer. It's too big, it's too complicated. And we played it for 10 minutes, we looked at each other, it was like, we have to make this online game, don't we?
Yeah, I want to be able to play with you when I'm not with you. And so it was born.
I have to learn network coding, don't I?
Well, that's another thing that I think is difficult for people to grasp. I'll hold on to my thoughts.
Yeah. Shout out to Nate from GD Quest, who half an hour ago posted an hour and 45-minute tutorial on using Nakama with Godot. So if you want to learn high-level networking with a pre-made open source server, that's where I would say you go. There's a free resource on YouTube. It is long. You will need to take notes. Do not take this as a beginner. Like, I started watching it. It's like, yep, this is challenging for me. This is not a one-sitting thing for me. But that is a great resource. And I'm especially happy about it because now I don't have to make that course.
Do you want to post the link in the chat?
Yeah, that's a thing I have.
Of course you do. So what I was going to say is that when things are in your mind, they're often quite small, contained, and condensed packages. And the moment you start experimenting and building, you very quickly end up with scope creep, where you start off with something small and it just goes on and on and on. The best example I can really sort of hone in on is when I'm putting together a course. The course can quite easily start at a 5-hour mini course, and then you go, oh, but I really want to teach just this and this and this and this and this. And before you know it, you've got a 20-hour course, or heaven forbid, a 40, 50, 60-hour course.
And it's tricky because it's hard to know when to stop. And I don't care if that's game development or writing a novel or making a course. There's that Alice in Wonderland thing. Start at the beginning, when you get to the end, stop. It's not that easy. Carol.
You can help by... so one of the things that really helped us was a game design document. We knew exactly what was going in the game, exactly what was not, which is also great because when we approached you guys to say, look, we want to make this thing, this is what we're doing, we weren't going to suffer from too much scope creep because we'd already sort of boxed in what we were going to do. And the same's true if you're creating your own game. What is it? And stick to that.
Yes. Hanzo points out, yes, like Ice Micers. Ice Micers had a lot of feature creep. Yes. But it was a fun game. I enjoyed that. When you make... design document is good. And we always start our games with the essential experience. To me, a game is an experience, a feeling. Everything else, the graphics, or if you use a board game, the rules, the components, the mechanics, or mechanisms. All of that are the tools I'm using to create that experience. That experience is the game. So once we figured out what Gotta Get Away was going to feel like, which to me was stunt drivers driving through a city chasing each other, right? That's where the electro swing comes in. It's all very cool and you feel very, very competent when you're doing these power skids around corners and things. That was the feeling. If we wanted to make it feel a lot more chaotic, then we would have had things like boxes flying around the places and breakable windows and stuff like that. That wasn't part of our design.
Yeah, all sorts of things like, does the car break? Is there a damage meter? Is there this, that, and the other? And those sorts of things, you may think, oh, it's a driving game, and it would be better if it had these things. And not necessarily. Take Mario Kart. That is not realistic any way, shape, or form, but it's still an incredibly enjoyable game. Or it certainly was when I played it back on the Super Nintendo. So
what's the thing everyone remembers about Mario Kart, of the power-ups? What's the one power-up everyone remembers?
The shell. It's got to be the shell. The red one. You got to get the red one.
And that's in there specifically because the experience of that game is a bunch of people shouting at each other on the couch. And nothing makes you shout like, I'm in the lead, I've been targeted by an unavoidable weapon. Right? That's what that is. It's not just a case of let's make this more fair. It's a case of let's get that feeling going. That was my story.
Brilliant. I want to elaborate a bit more on the Blender side of things.
Do so. I'm going to drink my coffee.
You do that. Yeah. So I've been looking at and getting a load of feedback on my courses, and the modular aspect of it, I would love to know in the comments if you have played with Blender and Godot. You know, Yann might do a similar thing with Godot, who knows. But is there something in Blender that you feel hasn't been explained very well to you, as in a section of Blender? So whether it's animation, rigging, and if you can be a bit more specific as to what type of rigging you were trying to do, or animation, or compositing. Blender has an awesomely... It has quite an awesome compositor in it. It's not quite up to the standards of something like a commercial Nuke, which is a program. Good UV mapping, no such thing.
Well, that's the thing. I've seen assets recently with really bad UV maps.
Yeah.
So here's a UV map, make your texture. It's like, yeah, but you're using this tiny section here, and the rest of the UV map is empty.
Yeah.
Which means I can have a 2048 by 2048 texture, and I still can't get the resolution I need.
Yeah.
Like, the skill of how do we unpack this and actually wrap this so it's a usable texture.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. And that's the thing. Something like Blender is so big, it's difficult to try and get a handle on the whole process. I mean, in this
case, I think my problem is not so much the process as the skill behind it.
Mm.
Like, knowing when you should press unwrap or smart unwrap, and knowing when you need to spend 10 minutes moving the lines around.
And also understanding the pipeline and the work through. So you don't have to do an industry pipeline. It doesn't have to be what they do in big industry, but sometimes they do it in a specific way for a very specific reason. Take UV unwrapping, for instance. If you were to model something, UV unwrap it and texture it, great. Now you go on to rigging and animating. But if now someone comes along and says, could you just make an extra thing on this? You're like, that's going to mean you need to unwrap it again, probably, unless you can hide it or tweak something around. But the moment you have to re-unwrap something, you're like, oh no, because that can be a lot of work to re-unwrap something, especially if you've already done the texturing. Even worse if the texturing's hand painted. So you've already, I don't know, done a plank of wood, nice simple model, and someone spent an hour or so putting in all the lines necessary to get that really nice, almost like a wow effect, that hand painted style.
I mean, this is also talking about getting the assets right before you start making them. Getting the game right before you start making it. It's the same as the game design document. Like, you want your design docs. At the very least, you need to know the style you're going for. You want Blender to be a solution for both 2D and 3D, but that's you. Hi, Johnny. It's a solution for 2D and 3D, absolutely. It doesn't mean it's the right one. I mean, that's a bit like me saying that I want GIMP to be a word processor. I can type documents in it. It might not be the right way to do it. Now, Blender has Grease Pencil, which I've never used.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
From what Blender used to have. So you get kind of excited when a program gives you a new feature. You're like, wow, it's amazing. And Grease Pencil's far beyond what we used to have as a tool set. But then there are much better 2D creation packages out there. That could be Critter or Krita. That could be GIMP, Inkscape. There are loads and loads of different programs.
I mean, depends what you want.
Oh,
like,
yeah, definitely.
If you're making a sprite sheet for an 8-bit or 16-bit game, maybe Blender is the wrong solution.
I've got to say the unpopular thing. It depends how you value your time. If you're trying to create a game and you're hoping to earn money from that game, use a £10 for a bit of software, £60 for a bit of software, is going to that could potentially make the difference between you.
Hobby you like I bought Box Hunter. I have no need for it. It's a cool toy, and I like playing with it.
It can make all the difference. And Blender has take the Blender Market, for example, and loads of other places as well. They're full of wonderful add-ons. And I've used Andrew Price's or Blender Guru's Pro Lighting Studio. Doesn't work quite as well as it used to anymore, but I've used that for all of my models when I need to present them. Click, couple of tweaks, done. Yeah, I'm absolutely fine. I could set up a lighting rig around my model, set up an HDR, whatever I need to do in order to get the lighting how I like it. Or I could go over here, click a couple of buttons, rotate the lighting round. Cool, render. And that, for me, saves me the hassle of having to do that process every time as a standard output. This is what I want the model to look like. This is just a showcase screenshot or render of that particular model. It's completely different, of course, if I was setting up a different scene and I wanted to uniquely light it. That is different. I'd spend the time lighting it accordingly.
Yeah, and there's a conversation going in the chat with Johnny and Hanzo. Johnny's saying he uses Illustrator. Hanzo is saying he uses Inkscape. They're both vector graphic programs, and
Yep.
I've never successfully used any vector graphic program.
I'll throw another one in there, Affinity Designer. That's the one that I currently use. I will, up until very recently, Inkscape has been incredibly laggy, I suppose is the best way you could do it, where you've been moving something around and you take a while to update. And that's fair enough. If you can tolerate that as a designer, as an artist, that's absolutely fine. Yes. Oh, it's much, much better recently.
Why am I so red?
I don't know. Play with your color settings. That's the only thing about that camera. Oh no, it's cold. Oh, that's very 70s sepia style.
It is, isn't it?
So yeah, I wouldn't say that everything in your workflow has to be free. I'm trying to think of what the program was called. Entertain them for a moment, Yann.
It's time to play the music. This is a conversation, I mean, it's happening right now in comments. It's a conversation we've had internally. Do we only teach open source software, and are we teaching only open source software that you don't pay for? Especially the ARDA versus LMMS debate. They're both free and open source, but ARDA is not free to buy. I mean, it's $1 a month, but, it's still money. Which for some people is a deal breaker. And it's not just philosophical differences. Depending on where you are in the world, actually, $20 for a piece of software might be a pretty big investment for some people, and it's throwaway comment for others. One of the big things, and this goes back to what Mikey was saying about how much you value your time, you can do incredible things with almost any piece of software that works in that field, if you know how to use it. My ex-wife picked up my drawing tablet. She'd never used it before, and in 2 minutes made this really beautiful painting of water lilies. I can't do that, and I use the thing every week, right? It's just not my expertise. There's a few things you can do with that. One is practice the software. Two is learn the theory. If you want to do really good 2D designs or 3D designs, it's not actually about learning the software, it's about learning design principles. At that point, you should be taking art courses or design courses. If you want to be a good artist, learn art.
Definitely. So what I was just thinking about was Marvelous Designer. For those who haven't heard of it, it's a clothing program. So you can produce really realistic clothing on your characters with literally, you draw a quick outline as if you were properly tailoring, and then you click a button, it goes and sticks to your character. Now that isn't cheap. That is an annual subscription of $1,700. So I would not recommend anybody that unless they were a professional character creator and they were doing one every week. Lovely. And obviously they've probably got other types of licensing as well. And of course you've got the flip side of that, which should be something like Mixamo and Adobe's Fuse, which I think they're cutting the cords on. I wish Adobe would stop killing software.
They've got a big Google with that, haven't they? It's a new thing. Okay, we're done with it now.
Oh, yeah. I used to use Google's, this was a few years back now, is it Today or To Do? I can't remember. They used to have this website you could go to and you could customize it with the weather and all, your news feeds and everything else.
Yeah, I remember. I used it all the time. I had
and then they just went...
comics up there.
I think I read the article that said not enough users were using us. Like, well, I was. Come on.
Joni missed it, and you were talking about what's your update for Blender?
So there will be something new coming Blender-wise soon. It's likely to be modular, which means you can pick and choose the parts of it that you want to take, which is going to take a bit more time in curating the content to make sure it does flow, rather than having to rely on anything previous that's been taught. So,
yeah, it's what we want to avoid is, okay, so let's carry on with what we did the last course. Because at that point, it's just a sneaky way of us getting you to buy more courses, which isn't really what we're trying to do. Like,
and
if we wanted to make money that badly, neither of us would be in education. I love being an educator. I made a lot more money in finance.
Very true. The other thing, of course, is on a learning journey stance. Every time and I do take courses as well, and I would tell you all, take as many courses from as many instructors as you like listening to and their teaching style. But when it comes to learning, I often don't know what I don't know yet, so I have to watch it all. And so if you were doing an animation and a rig, I'm going to keep using animation and rigging for the moment, but using animation and rigging as the example, do you need to build the character first? Well, that might be covered in maybe a sculpting course or something along those lines. But then at the beginning of the animation and rigging, you should probably start with a character already made, so you don't have to require those previous skills. And I will say, in industry again, there will be riggers out there that can't model, but they're awesome at rigging. There'll be UV unwrappers that can't model, maybe. I don't know. But the point is, you can be very skilled in a niche subsection of the 3D world, just as you can with game development as a whole as well.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, back-end and databases, if you were creating a massively multiplayer online course, or even just a local one, and you wanted to keep players' stats in a database, well, there'll be someone out there who could manage that database in a very optimal way.
I mean, an example I'd give is, and I'm a self-taught coder with drama degrees, right? I have a BA in drama and theatre arts and a master's in theatre education. I'm a self-taught coder. I think the games I make are pretty fun. The code I do is getting better. Like when I first started, it was very inefficient, but it's getting a lot better. But when I watch tutorials I saw a tutorial recently on making a worm-style game in Godot, and the solution they had for the terrain, because I was interested, how do you make destructible terrain like that, was, we're going to write a custom physics engine. Like, no, I'm not. That's not a thing I'm doing. Because that's not my skill set. That's not where I am as a coder. That's not where I've specialized. It goes back to what we were saying about how far do you specialize, and how far do you want to be a jack of all trades. Jody, for example, is saying that animation, for him, is the hardest part for characters.
It's a lot more involved than people think. This goes wider than just animation. Most things that, as a beginner, you will think, oh, this thing is only a small thing, or maybe it's slightly bigger. I can almost guarantee it's going to be a lot bigger than that, because once you've got your, let's say, a simple walk cycle done, what about the rest of the body? What about the hair? What about the handbag? What about
the 12 principles of animation? What about the character itself?
And that's that's something that I don't think can be. I do think can be taught, but I don't think by just watching walk cycle animations you'll ever get.
I mean, this is.
You have to do far more studies.
Effect, right?
Yeah.
This is the less you know of a topic, the more you think you understand it. The more you know the topic, the more you realize how much more there is to learn. Any topic you care to think of, the history of the hashtag is a lot more involved than you think it is. I mean, the history of the hashtag goes back to 16th century accounting.
Do you mean the pound symbol?
For us, it's the pound symbol. For them,
the hashtag.
Right. Why it was put on phones, like the history of the color pink, when pink was officially a color. Why? The fact that until the 1930s, pink was a very manly color and girls wore blue. You know, everything you can think of has a lot more depth to it. So the more you start studying things like animation, you first see animations, you see some walk cycles, like, well, I'll just do that, tween and keyframe, and it's done.
Yeah.
And then you start learning it. It's like, yes, but if I want to look good, I have to know this, the physics, the character, everything.
Oh yeah, if you were making a giant rock creature, he would lumber along. But if you were creating a rogue that was going to be all sneaky, they will have completely different movements, even with their simple walk.
And just the little details you put in of how they stand. You know, what's the eye animation? It gives so much character. I mean, you think of some really great animated games like Bastion. Fantastic animations. And that character has so much character in him because he looks so moody and sulky all the time. Or Mark of the Ninja is another great game for that. Just superb, like cartoon quality animation, but everything has so much character. You understand their personalities. So
a game, this is 2D animation, but animation nonetheless. A game that we played lots of about 6 months or so ago, Speedrunners, is not a graphically brilliant game at all. It's incredibly fun, especially if you've got a little bit of a competitive streak. But the animation gives these characters the fluidness that they need to go around the level with a lot of speed. And that really, really did make the game.
Each one has its own personality.
Yeah.
Which is why Mikey would always pick the chicken.
No, that was Mark. I always picked the astronaut.
You did always pick the astronaut. Well, cosmonaut.
But yeah.
Yes, it is an amazing art style. That's the thing, though. It's animation is very difficult once you start getting into it. In the same way that coding is very difficult once you start getting into it. You've got the initial learning thing where I don't understand any of it, and then this is easy. It's just functions and variables, and then there's the actual okay. Let's get into the art of it.
I remember when I was learning C++ at the time, and I think I just learned about nested for loops or something along those lines. So quite early on in your coding, and suddenly it was like a switch went off in my head. And I thought, can I do this? Can I do that? Yeah. And I was working with Sam at the time, and he was. I did a little exercise, and he went, "This is interesting, Mike. You've done everything you shouldn't do to get this working." There's several ways because C++ is so close to the metal. I was ending up. I'd done all these things that are the ways you're not supposed to do it, and would cause memory leaks and everything else. And he went, "Well, bravo for getting it to work." But that's the thing. Coding is an art in my mind. And art is obviously art as well. Music is an art. I think all of these things have a flair about them where you can do them in very clever ways, you can do them in very shorthand ways, and there often isn't a right way of doing something.
No, but there's lots of wrong ways. I mean, elegant coding is an art, it's a creative discipline, but it's there for a reason.
Oh, staying within the lines, essentially.
Yeah, it's easier for humans to read when you debug it, it runs faster.
Yeah, C++, efficiency, fast computing. But that's one thing, of course, that you might want to be able to get into eventually. I mean, obviously, GDScript, Python, those sort of declarative languages, they're not as fast to run as some of the lower level languages are. And the closer you get to the metal, the more efficient you can become. But the harder and more abstract the code happens to get. I think that's fair to say. I mean, I love Python. That's the other thing that I would really like to touch on more and more. I've been posting a couple of Python tutorials on my YouTube channel, but Python can be used for so much, and actually structuring it in a way that would make sense as a learning journey is actually quite challenging, because that's a core part of Blender, because the whole interface is Python driven essentially. But does that need a Python course first? Who knows?
I mean, I'm used to GDScript, which is based on Python.
Yeah.
But I can't pick up Blender Python and just code it. The differences are big enough that it doesn't work.
Well, yeah, I've handed you code and said, Yann, what do you think to this? Could it be optimized? And you're like, what? What does this bit do?
Well, why are the variables over here? You have to do that. Okay.
In this particular case. Yeah.
YouTube channel different than Canopy. But,
very warm. And if anybody has joined us since the beginning, we apologise for the fan-like sounds. They're fans.
I turned mine off. That's why I'm cooking.
I don't want to get up with it. These headphones. Something's dodgy in them, so I've clamped them at various places. And the fan's over there now anyway. So yeah, I think there's lots to be done. As always, we want to teach so much, and that's not.
Same with me and Goddo. There's so many things I didn't touch in the previous course that I'd love to look at, like global illumination probes. All of which is changing in 4.
How excited are you about 4? I mean, I'm getting juiced now for
excited.
Blender 2.9 is just around the corner.
Goddo 4 is in the future.
Just around the corner. I think it's September. I'm not sure.
They're probably going to do GoddoCon as a distance thing, which makes sense.
Yeah.
So if I'm presenting on that, I'll need a topic.
What are you going to do?
I don't know yet.
You'll find something, I'm sure.
I'll do the same thing as last year. No one will notice.
Well, there may be new people there, so it might work. Yeah, so with Blender, this is the other thing that's really challenging as a teacher, and why splitting and not doing a huge, massive course and sticking to something modular is Blender tends to change, and I don't know about Godot and how massively it would change, but Blender, they seem to work on one specific area at once and then move on. So obviously the grease pencil was new with 2.8, a few other things were new, but the overall extruding, loop cuts, and all the really basic modelling techniques, those are not, they haven't really changed. What they're called might have changed, might have been changed, but not actually the functions behind them. So a modular course would be far easier to keep up to date with the relevant versions where things have changed. Whereas,
I mean, this reminds me of one of the questions that I was asked at the end of my talk at GodotCon. For those of you who didn't see it, I did a talk on making tutorials for Godot, and it was basically an education theory primer for coders. And then someone asked, when you're teaching Godot, how much focus do you put on game design and how much on code? And for me, it's, you're not just teaching the tool, you're teaching the skill. It's not just a question of when you're making Blender, here's what the shortcut for extrude is. It's here's when you want to use it and why, and here's other things you can do instead. Yeah.
I mean, the classic one is extruding by nothing and then scaling. If you is one way that you could generate a new face level with the old one, but a larger version, so you can then go up with it. But if you went Alt and E and extrude along normals, you would get exactly the same result, but it's one thing less. So that's a great example of how and when would you use different types of extrusion. Although maybe that's a bit too specific. There is a question.
I didn't even know that was me. So there is a question.
There is a question about favourite Blender add-ons. So I've box cutter and kit ops, fabulous.
For any sort of hard surface modelling, they're fantastic.
So I've got quite a few. I'm just going to read them out because I only buy the ones I like. Quick Shot, that is for predetermined camera pans and zooms, so great for products. And I used it on a couple of pieces I've done recently. Again, it's like the lighting studio that I was talking about earlier. One click and it's done for me. Thank you very much. I'm happy to do the camera stuff where it's necessary and bespoke, but otherwise one click done. I've got a few materials packs as well. So there's definitely I can read properly now. Definitely EV material systems. That's I think by the same person as Quickshot. Half's shape generator. So this is something that will generate random shapes. Really useful.
Like you should put these out in a document and link it.
Yeah, that'd be good. Perhaps I can run through them actually on a video.
Yeah,
I'll run through them on a video. Yeah.
But just put them up on there with the thing that do it. I'm hot.
Brain failing. Yeah. So, that's a great idea. I'll basically go through that later on and record it and shove it up on the channel. I think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, it's great. Clickbait. Top 10 Blender add-ons. You won't believe number 6.
But wait for number 11. Aha, there's a bonus one.
I really hate that kind of clickbait type.
But it works. We were having
That's why I hate it. It's so transparent and it still works.
So we were having a discussion a couple of weeks back, I think, and when I started putting the thumbnails into the channel, because it was just our two heads when I'm chopping up, so there's clips for people to watch, so if they don't have an hour, they can pick one of the topics that we discussed around the actual live stream when we had it. And I didn't want to do what I've done on some of the ones on my channel where they're just too, me cut out and go, oh. And that was just
I have quite a reaction against those ones.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I love my Russian doll one where it's my head inside my head inside my head inside my head. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, a document to accompany it as well. Perhaps put something on the site under the blog section. We do. I don't know if it's got anything on it at the moment.
I think it's got here's our blog section in it.
Yeah, really need to give our site another overhaul. It was really
Tell you what though, if you do a video of it, put it on our site as well. We'll give free Blender tips.
Mm-hmm. I need to upload the last one onto there as well.
Yep.
So they're all in one place, safe. Just in case YouTube goes funny. As they can do. So, have you guys got any questions? We're here. Pick our brains if you dare. It can be anything. We'd prefer it to be...
As we go, but yeah.
This is also true.
It can be anything, but if it's too personal, I might not answer it. Or worse, I might, and then you'll be sorry.
So, whilst we're letting them think about their questions, where are you at the moment in terms of... Suffolk? I know you're in Suffolk. In terms of your stuff at the moment, what are you up to at the moment?
I'm finishing off the remaster for the Game Dev TV course. And then I need to figure out if I'm going to make a couple of small courses or fix the AI navigation and try and make a big course for Mag Racer. Last week people were saying that they'd like to see a Kickstarter for it, if that means getting in things like a sound design course or at least professional assets that they could use.
Yeah.
If we can't get those, I don't know how I feel about a Kickstarter. From a very selfish point of view, I love the idea because it means we get a bunch of cash up front. We don't have to worry about the company for a little while. But I don't want to charge you guys a bunch of money that I don't need to charge you. Like, I didn't get into education for unethical reasons. No one becomes a teacher to make money. It's a great career.
We love seeing people, seeing people develop. That's the main thing. Becoming a better person today than you were yesterday.
I was having this conversation with a friend of mine. He's a libertarian in Florida who collects assault rifles and is ex-military. He's basically the anti-Yann. We get on great. Like, legitimately get on great. We disagree about everything, and we're kind of fascinated by the other person's point of view. And he mentioned that he joined the military because he wants to make the world a better place. I said, but that's why I became a teacher. And it's like, you can get to the same idea for completely different things, and it would never occur to you to go the other way. Where am I with it? I still need to decide if a big beginner/intermediate course like Mag Racer is the next course. There are arguments financially for making bigger courses. There are arguments for making smaller courses. Spending 2 weeks on a course and releasing it and making a tenth of the money is still pretty viable because you can just keep knocking those out. But after a while, you run out of things that are actually useful to teach. You're just covering the same material. Big courses are much bigger commitments.
Yeah.
And it's much harder to fix the bugs in them because if you made a mistake 7 videos back, those next 7 videos are useless.
Or the developer changes something fundamental, like in Blender when they removed doubles and left it as merged by distance and changed it to merged by distance, but in the background they left it as remove doubles. So difficult finding it when I was doing the Python stuff.
Yep. So that's where I'm at. I'm interested in seeing what 4 has. I might spend some time downloading and compiling the current nightly alpha once I finish this remaster. I'm hoping to get that done this week. The heat wave is making it very difficult to know how much work I can do.
Yeah, tell me about it.
I mean, if I'm recording, I have to close the windows and shut down the fans, and I have an allergy to my own sweat. So I can do half an hour, and then I need to stop because my skin is cracking open, and I need iodine. Like, not to give you guys too much information. It's the stupidest allergy in history, but I have it. And that's slowing down my productivity a little bit. I would like to see things because they're talking about things like audio generation is coming to Godot.
Yes.
And I want to see what that looks like. Their navigation systems are much more involved, including things like obstacle avoidance. I haven't played with the new illumination system yet.
There's lots of exciting stuff, and it may be, when it first gets released, of course, there may be bits of it that are solid and worth teaching at the moment, and there will still be some bits of it that are going to be in flux. And those bits in flux, if we were to include them early on in the course, oh, something that you guys can all help us out with is other programs as you come across them. So obviously my main thing is Blender and art in general, and Yann is focused on Godot, there are some programs that we just don't know when they come out. So I only heard about Adobe Fuse, believe it or not, about 2 months ago.
I've never heard of it before you mentioned it.
And I looked at it and I thought, this is pretty cool. If only I'd known about it before. Quixel Mixer was one that was mentioned to me, because I knew about Quixel and their partners with, or their Epic grant, was it? Or no, it was bought by Epic. And I was like, oh, that's a shame. And because obviously some of that stuff is free, only if you use it in Epic stuff.
Well, they changed the license for that recently, but you still have to log in with your Epic account. And I was going through that whole thing, it's like, I don't really know what to do with this. I have substance data.
Well, that's the thing, you see. There are all these other programs out there, that, and especially if one creeps under the radar or is just a...
That's come up time and again.
Yes. But ultimately, the more we hear about something, the more likely we are to go and take a serious look at doing a course on it. I'd love to just double myself up, triple, quadruple myself, clone me, and just be able to pump out content on that front. Hold on a minute, there's a little...
I love you, mate, but we get nothing done on our work calls as it is, because we make each other laugh too much.
4 of me would be, a bit of a handful.
One-stop channel for all software might be a bit much, Joni, because I don't know how, like, where do we draw the line on all software? I mean, as it is, I don't use Unreal or Unity. Like, they're both fantastic things. I love the games they make. 5 minutes of working with Unity and I hated it. Just hated it.
I would love to get back into some Unreal stuff at some point.
I mean, I'd love to have it on the channel. I'm just not the person to teach it, because the amount of gritting my teeth while I get this thing going I'd have to do compared to something like Godot where I could just make it work. And this is not slicing the other engines, by the way. This is work with your personal preference.
Oh yeah. I've picked up Maya about 5 times in the last 5 years. As not just picked it up, as in properly opened it up and tried to work in it. And it is, sometimes it's what you're used to. Sometimes it is your personal preference and you don't realise that. I mean, when Blender went from 2.79 to 2.8 and they finally changed the right-click select to left-click select, it took me about a week to adjust back, and I was like, wow, this is so much better. And I think that's made Blender so much more popular than it would have ever been. Just that one decision. Asking people to adhere to a different paradigm when there's no fundamental reason for it is very challenging.
Yep. You see a lot of that with indie games as well. I saw one recently where you have to use the cursor arrows
instead of WASD.
Yeah, or being allowed to rebind the keys. It's like that was a paradigm in the very early 90s. Because I used to always use cursor arrows, everyone did. And then Wolf 3D came out and started shifting to WSAD or whatever the AZT version of that is. And it changes everything.
And not being able to rebind, that's not just a preference thing, that could be a disability thing as well. So
or a regional thing. There was a great example. There's a plugin you can get for Godot on the Asset library for a 3D character with
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
controller with a camera built in. So if you're making 3D things and you just want to drop it in, make sure it works, it's great. Except the solution they've chosen is key scan, not input. Input takes what's the name of the input you've given it, like forward, and then what's the key that's bound to it. Let's just look that up. Key scan is what's the actual key you've pressed. Well, whoever wrote this uses an AZT keyboard, which means they're probably in France. My keyboard is QWERTY.
Which
means that S for me is backwards, not forwards.
Yeah.
And left for them was Z, and for me it's A. And I can't rebind anything.
You have to rewrite the plugin, essentially.
At that point, the plugin's useless to me, because I'm having to start from scratch. And I understand why they've done this. It's just a quick and easy thing. Well, these are the keys. I don't need to worry about input mapping, but actually it's the wrong decision.
So that's something to bear in mind when you're creating your games, is to make sure that you give your players the ability to change things if they need to.
Yep.
So, if no one's got
Yep.
if no one's got any other questions, we've just gone over the hour or so. So we're going to give you a few more minutes or moments. I won't say minutes, moments. To minute moments, magic minute moments with Mikey. Mikey's magic minute moments. No, I'm making myself laugh. What? Marvelous Mikey's magic minute moments. If you no.
Here we go. Have you tried a Dyson fan? They seem pretty silent. This is a question's come through on the Discord. I'm actually not using the fan at all right now. I have used the Dyson fan. They're great. They're a lot more expensive.
And I still find them loud.
But good tip.
Yeah. I like the style of them. I like the idea that my William, who's 5, can't do what I did when I was little and stick things in. Like his fingers.
Anyway, I am going to cool down.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, guys. And we'll chop this up into clips for anybody who's missed it. Chop, 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 chop. And for easy digesting later. All right, take care, everyone.
Have fun. Bye.
See you in 2 weeks' time. Bye.